Many articles and videos talk about the thousands of bones and the long-headed skulls discovered in the Ħal Saflieni Hypogeum in Malta, but usually without any reference to the original excavation reports or peer-reviewed papers on the subject. So in this video, I'm delving deep into this particular set of rumours to show you the facts. Yes, there is a bit of a mystery, but no, it's not what the sensationalist articles and videos are saying it is. There are two main rumours I'm discussing. Firstly, that the bones of more than 7,000 people were found in the Hypogeum. Secondly, that long-headed skulls were also excavated. The second rumour has been strengthened by the skulls that were found having had only short appearances on display at the National Museum of Archaeology, leading people to talk of a cover-up. So let's get started with a quick introduction to the Ħal Saflieni Hypogeum, where this particular mystery takes place. It's an underground Neolithic complex dating back 5,000 years and was contemporary with the megalithic above-ground temples such as Gigantia, Hajar'im and Amnidra. Built on 3 levels, it has trilithon doorways, ornate carvings which imitate the architecture of the temples, and red ochre decorations. Much of it is still intact. Experts think that it was both a burial site and a sanctuary during the time it was in use, since many areas appear to have been used for ritual activity, and lots of finds such as the famous sleeping lady figurine point towards this as well. It's close to the Tarshin temples, the Khordin III temple, the destroyed temple sites of Khordin I and Khordin II, and the much smaller, only partially excavated Santa Lucia Hypogeum. A similar necropolis known as the Shara Stone Circle has also been excavated in Gozo. But apart from that, no other Neolithic hypogea have been found on the islands. Considering there may have been as many as 100 temple sites, there's an intriguing possibility that more underground sanctuaries have yet to be discovered. The Hypogeum was discovered by accident during building works in 1902. Initial excavations were led by the priest and antiquarian Manuel Magri. Unfortunately, he died a few years later in Tunisia and his notes couldn't be found. The famous Temi Zammit then continued the excavations. There were several reports published afterwards by Zammit and his team. 2 of these are entitled The Small Objects and the Human Skulls Found in the Ħal Saflieni Hypogeum and the Ħal Saflieni Prehistoric Hypogeum of Casal Porla, Malta. Here are some direct quotes from these reports which give information about the bones and skulls. No complete skeletons came to light, and the bones lay in confusion through the soil, except that occasionally an arm with fingers and complete foot and several vertebrae would be found lying with the parts in situ. From the upright position of an isolated radius, it might be judged that the filling up of the cave was of a wholesale nature rather than that individual burials took place in it. Such an opinion would be strengthened by the fact that unrelated bones and also implements were found in the interior of the skulls. The finding of 6 vertebrae in position, 5 of them without spinous processes, suggests a case of reburial, and it is an open question how far most of the interments may not have been of this character. Animal bones were found mingled with human. Many skulls were discovered, both adult and juvenile, but so friable owing to dampness as to be incapable of preservation. Human bones were found in great numbers, but not one skeleton could be made out to have been whole and regularly laid out for burial. All the bones suffered much from the dampness of the soil, and the least pressure on a bone reduced it to fragments. The following bones were sorted: 40 clavicles, 68 heel bones, 24 first vertebrae, 119 right patellae, 119 left patellae, and 5 doubtful patellae. With these data, it was reasonable to conclude that the skeletons of at least 120 persons were deposited in a space not larger than 3.17 by 1.2 by 1 meters. So the impression we get from these reports is that the conditions meant it was difficult to excavate many bones intact. A lot of them disintegrated upon contact. We also learn that rather than regular burials, Zamet and his team were met with a heap of disarticulated skeletons diffused through damp soil, filling the chambers of the Hypogeum, and mixed in with objects and animal bones. Zamet never actually said 7,000 skeletons had been found, but since he calculated that the bones he discovered in a small space belonged to around 120 individuals, he estimated that if the bones had been preserved throughout the rest of the complex and were of a similar volume and density, then 7,000 skeletons could have been deposited there originally. The way the bones were found only adds to the mystery of this strange underground complex. It should also be noted that bones were only discovered in the upper two levels. The lowest one was completely devoid of finds. Experts think that the Hypogeum was not used for primary burials, but acted as an ossuary for the deposit of bones later on. They also think the room known as the Holy of Holies, which is carved to look like an above-ground temple, was used for rituals, giving the complex a dual purpose. However, there are researchers who doubt this idea. In their book, Malta, Echoes of Plato's Island, Mifsud, Ajuz Sultana and Savona Ventura put forward the idea that the soil containing the bones was an alluvial deposit caused by a huge flood, which brought in burials from rock-cut tombs in the surrounding countryside. It's also worth noting this from the Museum Annual Report of 1973-74 about the discovery of the Santa Lucia Hypogeum almost 2 kilometers to the southwest. The leading discovery of the year was made at the new government housing estate in Santa Lucia, where an underground burial place reminiscent of the Ħal Saflieni Hypogeum was identified. The small labyrinth was provided with a megalithic structure serving as an entrance and contained a considerable quantity of human bones, Copper-Age pottery, and a few amulets made of shell and imported stone. As in the Hypogeum, from which the new site is only half a mile distant, there were no regular inhumations, but a filling made up of stony soil containing the above-mentioned finds, as if the mass had been dumped inside the monument from the surface. I personally think that it's entirely possible that the bones arrived in these Hypogea by accident and that their primary purpose wasn't as burial sites. However, I would take the flood theory a bit further. In the Neolithic, Malta had torrential rains just as it does today. So with regular seasonal rains, surely there would have been a slow build-up of material in underground sanctuaries that had fallen out of use, rather than a wholesale dumping of soil and bones into them, unless this was caused by a particularly bad flood, such as a tsunami created by seismic activity in the Mediterranean. There are some interesting peer-reviewed papers on the idea that a significant tsunami did happen in Malta before the historic period. Evidence has been found in the southeast of the mainland. However, it's debatable evidence, because according to the experts who wrote the papers, tsunamis are difficult to prove, but it is possible that seismic activity in the Mediterranean did cause a tsunami to hit at an undatable time in the past. In total, only 11 skulls were recovered from the Hypogeum. In the 1920s, skulls were classified according to the Cephalic Index by Paul Broca. This index was based on the ratio of the length and breadth of the cranium. The classification, known as dolichocephalic, referred to long-headed crania. Zamet and his team put the 11 skulls from the Hypogeum into this category. These are photographs of the skulls taken at the time. As you can see, all but one are not particularly long-headed to the untrained eye. They were only classed as such based on their measurements and the parameters used in the early 20th century. If you compare these skulls to the long-headed ones found in Peru, which had undergone artificial cranial modification, they are widely different in appearance. Experts no longer consider the Hypogeum skulls as unusual and take into account many other factors when analysing cranial morphology anyway. At the end of 2020, the skulls were put on display once again at the National Museum of Archaeology. I visited the exhibition, And they certainly look quite ordinary to me and very much the same as the original photographs taken by Zamet and his team in the early 1920s. They are all labelled with both their original and modern reference numbers. So what about the one skull that is obviously more long-headed than the others? Zamet referenced this one as number 11 in his report. Experts have analysed this skull and found it belonged to someone suffering from a condition called craniosynostosis. This is where the sagittal suture at the top of the cranium fuses too early, causing the growing brain to change the shape of the skull. This is a curable condition these days, so it seems the skulls are not long-headed after all, except for one, which can be explained medically. It's also clear that 7,000 skeletons were not excavated from the site. However, I still think there's a mystery here, and that's the way in which the skeletal remains were found in disarray, mixed in with huge volumes of soil, animal bones, and Neolithic objects, especially since the same situation was encountered at the Santa Lucia Hypogeum in the 1970s, and even then it was acknowledged as strange. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel, and come and find me on Instagram and Twitter. I'm also on Patreon, and more information can be found on the sites that I visit at my website megalithhunter.com.